My husband and I engaged a surrogate because I am unable to have children, but it turned out she was having an affair with him. Through correspondence, I learned their plan to remove my baby and money. I, 35, have been married to my husband, Jake, 40, for the past 8 years, and we have been together for more than 10 years. I met him in college, and although he was a few years older than me, that didn't matter in our relationship. I've always been an ambitious lady, and he knew it when we met. I work as a marketing manager for a big business, whose name I cannot reveal for obvious reasons. I've worked extremely hard to get where I am, because I started in the profession with no contacts and no support from anyone. I had to patiently work my way up the ladder in my field, and I'm quite proud of where I've gotten. When things got serious between Jake and me, I told him that developing my career was a priority for me, and if he didn't understand and support it, I couldn't see having a life with him. Jake understood completely because he is a driven and ambitious individual. He is currently employed in the financial department of a technology company and has slowly advanced in his profession to make a name for himself. However, about 5 years ago, Jake and I began to have marital problems. He believed that I had done exceptionally well in my job and that it was time to focus on creating a family and raising children. I didn't feel the same way. While I knew I'd come a long way, I also realized there was still time and more that I could accomplish. By that point, I had begun to consider switching to my current brand or other similar ones. Securing employment here is difficult, but my previous career was also in peril because of the global financial crisis. I knew they were going to start laying us off shortly, and I couldn't afford it, so I wanted to make the transfer before anything bad happened. Jake, on the other hand, saw this as an excellent chance for us to start a family. If I was laid off, I'd have a break in which I could focus on the baby for a couple of years before returning to work if I wanted. I didn't want it for myself at all. Every time we had a chat about it, it turned into a battle, and I knew he wasn't interested in listening to me or hearing my side, so I started applying to these places without telling him. I felt terrible at first, because he was my partner, and we had always shared things together, but I realized I couldn't give up my profession at this point. A few months later, in early 2022, I secured my current position. When I did, I was happy and immensely proud of myself, but Jake did not share those feelings. He was taken aback that I had made such a significant decision without considering his opinions and how it might disrupt our family for the foreseeable future. I tried to explain my point of view to him, but he was hurt and refused to make any sense. I realized I needed to devote this time to salvaging and improving our relationship. By September 2022, I had demonstrated my worth to my managers and supervisors, and my work terms were upgraded. The benefits that I have subsequently received have been incredible, and this is primarily why I needed to make the decision. I realized that after you've established yourself and worked hard, you have a lot of bargaining power in these major corporations. When I told Jake about the benefits I was receiving, he initially assumed I was joking because they were so excellent. I'd get 8 months of paid maternity leave, followed by 4 months of unpaid leave or working from home. I was free to choose. None of this would have been possible at my previous employment. I believed this was the greatest moment to try for a kid, because I wouldn't have to give up my career for parenthood. I had a stable career with accommodations to help me transition into this new stage of life as smoothly as possible. I believed everything was going great, so we started trying for a child. Unfortunately, we had little success until February 2023, when we decided to consult a doctor to figure out what was going on. We were both worried, him more than me, and felt that this was the best course of action in such a case. The test results were clear. I had an extremely low likelihood of conceiving naturally. I was upset since I desperately wanted a child. The doctor said that this was not due to my age or lifestyle, but rather a side effect of a devastating sickness I had in my late teens, so there was nothing I could do about it. Jake, however, did not comprehend this. He believed that because I was beyond 30 years old, these issues were occurring. He was actually behaving like a jerk, not listening to what the doctor was saying, and instead making up his own stories and beliefs. He began blaming me and my ambition for my infertility, claiming that if I had just listened to him and not been so focused on my job, we would have been parents by now. He would not change his mind no matter how many debates, disputes, family interventions, or medical opinions he received. It was as if he was waiting for the ideal time to blame me and despised my job. It became mentally demanding for me, especially as I dealt with my own personal sadness. I was heartbroken when I realized that I would never be able to carry a child to term. It was the most difficult time in my life, and I had no one to lean on. My in-laws intervened at this point. They had arrived at our house for Easter that year and were shocked to see the situation we were in. Both of them wanted us to work things out for ourselves, but we were always at odds. They then decided to fly down and talk to us about our concerns. My father-in-law ripped into Jake for blaming me for something over which I had no influence. Even my mother-in-law expressed disdain that she had raised a kid like him. They were incredibly supportive of me throughout, and I was grateful for that. I know that if they hadn't intervened at that point, the marriage would have ended. In retrospect, I often wonder whether that would have been better because neither my in-laws nor I knew what was going to happen next. After many back and forth fights and tears, Jake and I got along better. It was difficult to accept the idea that I would be unable to conceive, but I was gradually coming to grips with reality. After a few weeks, I asked Jake if he was open to adoption because, at the end of the day, we wanted to be parents, and there were too many children in the world who needed it. I had no objections to loving and nurturing a child who was not my biological child, but I also knew Jake would not think the same way. Even when we were dating, I recall us talking about parenthood once. I asked him once if he would be open to adoption in the future. He appeared amused by the suggestion at the time, as if I had said the strangest thing ever. He chuckled at me, saying that he never considered these concerns because he believed such a situation would never occur. I pressed him a little, but I noticed he was becoming annoyed, so I dropped the subject, and it never came up again. So I approached him with hesitation, but I felt this was an essential topic, and now was the moment to have it. I approached the subject delicately, initially skirting the issue, but he soon figured it out. Before I could even bring up adoption, he stated unequivocally that he would not raise anybody else's child. Therefore, it was out of the question. He said it as if it were definitive and there would be no debate about it. I tried to press it further since I wanted to explore all avenues to make this happen for us, but he was resolute in his position. He just wouldn't listen to what I was saying. I was fatigued, so I questioned him about our other alternatives. He stated I could either have fertility treatments, which he made very clear he desired, or we could proceed with surrogacy. I stated unequivocally that I would not be undergoing fertility treatments. I know a number of women who do, and I know how much torment their bodies must endure to make it happen. It didn't make sense to me to spend so much money and destroy my body just to have a child of my own. As a result, we both vetoed each other's first suggestions. My option was adoption, which he strongly opposed, and his was fertility treatments, which I refused to consider. Surrogacy was a point of agreement for both of us. Neither of us had considered it as our preferred option, and there was a lot of back and forth trying to persuade the other to reconsider and pick adoption or fertility treatments, but we were both obstinate and refused to move, so we ultimately decided on surrogacy. Fortunately for us, we found a willing surrogate very quickly. It was Emily, his 29-year-old co-worker. He was the one who proposed her to me, and she said she would gladly do it if we were compatible. I was glad that we didn't have to look as hard for a surrogate, but I should have known. I'm not sure why my instincts didn't kick in. They usually do. I should have realized something was wrong, and it couldn't have been a coincidence that she was so eager to be a surrogate. Neither of these suspicions developed at the time. I was just relieved that the initial part of the process was complete, and now we only had to deal with the doctors. She underwent several tests and intense doctor sessions, but the physicians appeared optimistic. She was young and fertile, and doctors believed she had a strong chance of carrying the baby to term. The samples had already been gathered and stored. Thus, the only remaining step was implantation. After all of this, and the papers were completed, the physicians scheduled us for the big day. Jake and I were both quite happy and nervous the entire time. I felt like a little girl about to write an exam. Emily was anxious, but she put on a brave face for us. After the implantation, we were instructed to return in 2 to 3 weeks to determine if it was effective. They handed Emily a to-do list, the main goal of which was for her to avoid stress. Which seemed ironic, but that's how it is. The next few days passed in a blur. We were in frequent contact with Emily, and I now believe we grew a little overbearing. Jake and I went to her house once a day to check on her. On the day of the follow-up, we learned that the implantation was successful, and I believe it was the best day of my life. It seemed as if all of my anxieties and regrets had gone away. Jake and I were anxious about the baby throughout the first trimester, so we didn't tell anyone. We had expected to make the news in the 4th or 5th month, not earlier. The first few weeks after we received word of the success were fantastic. Both Jake and I kept in touch with Emily and assisted her with any medical concerns she was experiencing. By 1.5 months, things had started to go downhill. Emily's morning sickness worsened and she had to call in sick from work because it was so severe. The physicians provided some very minor medications, but basically told her that she had to tough it out because this was typical and would most likely continue the entire trimester, if not longer. During this time, I also sustained an injury. It was a fracture in my left wrist, and I needed assistance with several tasks around the house. Jake's focus was divided for the first few days. I didn't bat an eye because I couldn't check on Emily due to my injury. I was relieved that he recognized the gravity of the problem and took decisive action. He dealt with Emily while I healed, but what irritated me was his complete disregard for my condition. It was as if I was no longer important. All of his attention was focused on Emily. He wanted to spend his leisure time with her or chat about her. I tried not to say anything because Jake was dealing with a lot of things at once while I was injured, but I became quite irritated with it. It all came to a climax one day when he asked if I even cared about our child, and I snapped back, accusing him of not caring about me. After the initial outburst of rage, we sat down and spoke about how we both felt, and he promised to do more to make me feel important and heard. I trusted him, a terrible mistake, and we went for. His behaviour towards me improved during the next few days. I'll grant him that. He was more attentive, and we spent more time together, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. He was still fawning over Emily like a puppy, and with each passing day, it became clear that he saw her as his wife rather than our surrogate. She had taken time off from work, and while it was paid leave, Jake was still working extra hours to cover for her and went to see her every day, even if I'd already seen her earlier. The first thing he did after leaving work was drive to her house and spend some bonding time with her. This is how he put it. He was bonding with her, not the surrogate. He returned, changed, ate, and fell asleep. We lived a dead married existence. We didn't talk to each other unless it was about Emily. His attention was not on his child, but on the surrogate bearing his child, and it was heartbreaking for me to be around that kind of conversation all the time. It left me feeling completely inadequate and incomplete as a woman. I wanted to bring this up with him, but I knew I couldn't because my infertility had caused it. We needed a surrogate because I couldn't have children on my own, and Emily was sacrificing her health and life to help us. I felt like a nasty human being for feeling envious and angry at her rather than grateful. The whole scenario was driving me insane, to the point that I was questioning if surrogacy was really a viable choice. Instead of bringing us closer, it had pushed a chasm between Jake and me, which I had not anticipated. I'm not sure what came over me, but the chemistry between Jake and Emily was driving me insane. I was overthinking every waking moment, and I had this nagging suspicion that they were having an affair. I didn't have any other plausible explanation. I could describe his sentiments as those of a guy on the verge of fatherhood, which he ardently anticipated. I probably would have felt the same way, but all of the alarms were going off in my head, and I knew I needed to do something to calm my anxiety. Emily was more than 7 months pregnant when I began to dig through his belongings in search of something that either proved or dispelled my suspicions. While Jake was entirely focused on Emily and her pregnancy, I was completely focused on figuring out what was going on between them. I acknowledged that at the time, I was not the finest partner for my husband or support system for Emily, but in my defense, I was too preoccupied with myself to care for them. And to all of you who will pounce on me in the comments, stating that I should have just spoken to my husband, I tried, not once, but several times, but his behaviour never altered, which made me feel even worse, that despite my expressing my concerns, he had no regard for them at all. So, anytime I had time, I would check his phone and communicate. He has 2 numbers, therefore it took me a while to scan everything. I did not locate anything in his texts or on Instagram. The texts and DMs were largely simply her telling him about anything going on with her and him checking in on her. It seemed a little too safe for work. Some parts of the conversation appeared to have been erased due to a lack of flow in the chat, but I couldn't be certain. I felt a little guilty after all this snooping, because I didn't uncover anything remotely suspicious. Nevertheless, I was dissatisfied. I then proceeded to check his emails. I finally got a chance to contact them yesterday. His professional email contained only official work-related correspondence. I searched his private accounts, and there were no communications, no interaction with Emily, nothing. It was then that I noticed a third email address, one that was already logged into a system. I instantly opened it, and it included communications from just one other email address dating back to 2021. I didn't have time to read all of the emails, so I copied and pasted many of them and forwarded the document to myself. I was afraid I'd get caught spying, which would lose my one chance to confirm my suspicions. Fortunately, I had luck on my side, as I was able to transcribe the entire chat without waking Jake up. I couldn't sleep a wink all night. I wanted to read every single email aloud to him, but I knew I had to be strategic rather than impulsive. I decided to wait until he left for work the following day before reading the emails. What I discovered rocked me to the core. It made me want to shoot a bullet into his chest. He was not only cheating on me emotionally and physically, but he also intended to defraud me. It took me hours to sort through all of the emails. So basically, I discovered that he and Emily have been having an affair since mid-2021. Nobody in their office knew about it. It began with him telling her about our troubles, and she listened to him and validated him. It gradually became more intimate, sleazy nasty letters and photographs, verbal abuse and mockery directed at me, and so on. It was terrifying to read. When I read this, something inside of me broke. It felt as if everything I had created over the years had come tumbling down on me, and there was nothing I could do about it. I gathered my strength and continued reading. So Emily was unable to have children on her own due to a problem with her eggs, and she was the type of woman Jake would prefer to have as his children's mother. So they devised a plan together. The goal was for them to persuade me to consent to surrogacy, and Emily would step in as the savior. Jake had persuaded Emily that once the baby was born, it would be best for their family if Emily stopped her job and became a stay-at-home mum. The only way they could have afforded a nice lifestyle with only one wage and a family of 3 was if they had drawn me in. The goal was for Jake to start picking up conflicts with me immediately before the kid was born, eventually leading to our divorce. He would then petition the courts for primary custody since, while I was the biological mother, he was willing to raise the child with the surrogate. I'd then have to pay large child support payments until the child was 18, which I could manage given my work. They would then use these funds to live a picture-perfect existence together. Everything was detailed in the emails. I didn't feel any pain at first. All I felt was astonishment and numbness. My head couldn't handle the months of diligent planning. If they were so happy together and he didn't want to be with me, he should have told me. I'd been living in a false marriage for the last 2 years, working through issues and allowing my self-esteem to be devastated. Also, he could have an affair and a baby, my baby, with another woman. Every ounce of love I felt for him went away in an instant. I could only sense hatred and loathing in every part of my existence. I realized I needed to do something quickly. I needed to get my ducks in order and get myself and my child out of this situation as quickly as possible. I called my lawyer friend Kelly and explained that I needed to stay with her for a few days to straighten things out. I then texted Jake that Kelly was unwell and needed someone to help, so I'd head over to her place so I wouldn't be bothered. I'm not sure where I stand legally in this situation, but I'm not about to give up or back down. Update #1. Kelly and I had a long conversation. She can't believe it's been 2 years, and I had no idea. I informed her that I had no reason to suspect him, despite the fact that we were having our share of problems. I never imagined that the man I'd been with for 10 years would do anything like this and completely violate my trust. The good news is that we know what legal measures we need to follow next, and she is confident that I will win this case. However, she claims that everything must happen prior to delivery and that we will have to make the entire scheme, and therefore their little affair, public, because if not, I will not have a chance in court. The other option is to wait things out and wait for Jake to initiate the divorce before attempting to obtain primary custody, but this is doubtful. To be completely honest, Jake does not deserve this grace. He deserves all of the mudslinging he will receive for wrecking my life in this way, and I can't wait to expose him and Emily everywhere, in the courts, in the family, and most importantly, at their workplace. That's the only way I can exact my revenge. Update #2. It had been 4 days since I had read his emails. After spending the day with Kelly, I went home for one day and packed all of my vital belongings while he was at work. I didn't want him to believe I knew or was planning anything, so I stayed with Jake that day and tried to act normally. Kelly, meanwhile, was preparing the divorce paperwork. Today, shortly after Jake left for work, I took all of my belongings to Kelly's place. She had already delivered the divorce papers to his office, as well as a notification to his boss, informing him that 2 of his employees would be embroiled in a lengthy judicial case based on adultery and fraud. This was just meant to inform management about my soon-to-be ex-husband's adorable little affair with his witch of a partner. It did have the expected impact, since Jake has been attempting to reach me by all means available. He's tried calling, leaving voicemails, messaging, and calling his friends' and co-workers' phones. Kelly has warned me not to accept any strange calls on my phone, and if I do, I should record them, because whatever he says from this point on can be used as proof. His messages themselves are quite incriminating. He has had a complete tantrum in my conversation, going between asking me to return to make things right and calling me every name under the sun. Surprisingly, Emily has not contacted or attempted to contact me yet, despite the fact that I am confident Jake would have informed her of the latest happenings that would shake her world. I believe I now have the time and luxury to grieve the loss of my marriage and life as I knew it, now that the confrontation is over. I've been in fight mode since I found out, so now I know I can let myself experience all of the emotions I've been suppressing for the past few days. Update #3. It's been a month since I served Jake with divorce papers, and things are going well for me. I've moved in with Kelly in her spare bedroom for the time being, but I'll sign my lease for the new apartment by the end of this week. It's a 2-bedroom apartment in a relatively respectable part of town that matches my budget perfectly. Jake has been sacked, which is exactly what Kelly planned when he disclosed the information to his supervisor. Emily and he are unable to claim custody of the child once it is born because he no longer has a source of income. Emily has not been fired because the corporation has most likely considered her pregnancy, but she has been asked to reconsider her position within the company post-pregnancy. However, people in their company now believe the child is Jake and Emily's, which isn't helping them either. Their reputation in the industry has been entirely destroyed, which is impacting Emily greatly. My soon-to-be ex-husband informed me of all of this via a drunken phone call. Overall, Kelly and I are certain that we will win this one. I am unable to provide additional information at this time because the case is still active and could be used against me. I may have to offer Jake some visitation rights, but Kelly says Emily will have no legal rights to the child, which relieves me. I will no longer be posting since I do not want specifics about the case to go public for fear of being identified. Thank you to everyone who left feedback and proposed a course of action for me. I'm grateful, but I'm taking a vacation from Reddit to move forward.